Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your attendance at the TWØBAYS Brewing webinar for to support the share offer that's upcoming. I'm Mark Hubbard. I'm campaign manager at OnMarket. And I'm joined by Richard Jeffares, the CEO and founder of TWØBAYS Brewing, Australia's premier gluten-free brewery. Thank you all for your attendance. We're going to start by Richard taking you through a presentation that will introduce to you the offer and the opportunity you have to become a shareholder in TWØBAYS. And with that, I'll send it off to Richard.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark, and welcome everybody. I was just very thankful that I'm not standing in front of 300 odd people and we're doing it through a webinar. It's a little bit less nerve-wracking. Just as a way of introduction, we sent out an email earlier today and you would have seen a bit of a brewery tour. So instead of doing that at the start of this webinar, we thought we'd go into some slides first, but hopefully you'll have a chance sometime over the next 24 hours to look at that brewery tour and see how we make the beer and how the operation is set up for those of you that haven't been able to come down to Germana. The offer document, I mean, we love this prohibition poster. We've used it quite a bit over the years. Because I think as a celiac person and a gluten-free avoider, beer is something that we do actually want. And so we think it's a very appropriate sort of banner for us to run our campaign behind. Just a bit of background on the offer. We are going to be looking to raise between $300,000 and $2.5 million. And we're doing that at $1 a share, as you'll see further through the document, but also in much more detail in the offer document, which comes out on the 14th of October. Just as a little bit of background, I'm not going to read through this, but crowdsourcing is a risky investment, and we do encourage all of you to read the offer document properly, seek advice if need be. It's got some limitations around liquidity. We have had a number of people ask us, can we sell the shares? The answer is not for the first 12 months, but you can after that. But there aren't necessarily the buyers, and it's certainly not as easy as doing it as if it was an ASX listed entity. But let's continue on a bit more and give you a little bit about TWØBAYS. There's been obviously a lot of stuff, and over the years, we love this picture. This was taken at a celebration store in Tasmania, where they really showed what an end of aisle could look like for gluten-free lovers. And that was a fantastic exercise we did with those guys. But really, we're all about believing every liquor licensee in Australia should offer a gluten-free beer. There's 50,000 liquor licenses, we think, give or take. In Australia, we're in about 2,500 of them so far. So we think there's a huge opportunity still for us to find new and infill with places all over the country, both regional and within the metropolitan areas. So that's what the team and the sales team get up and are chasing every single day. And that's really what a lot of this campaign is about for funds. Just a little bit of background on TWØBAYS from a financial perspective. From FY24 to FY25, we grew 18.6%. So last year, we saw significant growth and we saw it across all our revenue streams. So it was a fantastic and an exciting return to significant growth. We've had growth every single year, as you'll see in a later slide. But this was starting us to feel, even with the cost of living crisis going on, and we recognize that we're a premium price point product, to see that growth was fantastic. Lifetime revenue, $20.3 million, and a compound annual growth rate of 23.6%. So that means over the last 6 years, I think it is, we've been growing at 23.6% on average every year, compounding. So it's fantastic growth compared to the growth rate within the overall category, and certainly within broader beer. From a FY25 perspective, last year we did $4.7 million in revenue, and we split our revenue between two streams. One is the wholesale channel. So that's where we sell into bottle shops, venues, stadiums around the country, and that's 80% of our business. And then we have direct to consumer, and we split that internally between our online sales and our taproom sales. So that's where we get to talk directly to consumers, really one-on-one between TWØBAYS and them. And that's a significant part of our business at 20%. Certainly, we are told it's the highest online business in Australia from a beer perspective. Sorry, I should say from a beer perspective. A little bit of background on our story so far. And this is some of our proudest moments. And we put this up, and it's in the offer document again, because these are things that we, I'm not sure if somebody not Mark,
Pardon me?
I'm getting voices, so I'm not sure whether somebody's not muted. But we'll keep going. Proudest moment. So we got into Dan Murphy's very early on with national distribution, which we were thrilled about. Everybody's probably aware that between Dan Murphy's and BWS, that's about 50% of the take-home beer market in Australia. So to get that as an early leg in, and Dan's have since taken GFB almost nationally, and I'm sorry to the Queenslanders that don't get it up there. We're trying hard. And in Victoria, they've taken the Japanese rice lager as well. We won the Indies Champion Beer in 2023 for specialty beer. And again, that's where we beat barley beers in that category. So that really proved that gluten-free beer, I never thought in my lifetime that we would actually win a champion trophy for anything, because our category was, mixed up with a whole lot of other beers. But that really proved that, our beers can stack up against traditional barley beers. And that was for our session ale. Getting into the MCG was clearly a highlight. Wasn't so good last weekend or 2 weekends ago when Geelong lost, but it was great to be able to have a beer at the end of that game. 2 back-to-back World Beer Cups. No Australian brewery has ever won back-to-back gold medals in any category. And so it was a huge highlight for us. We were thrilled to be there for the first one, but when we won the second one with the Pacific Ale, it was an unbelievable experience. Clearly our tap room, as you'll read again in the offer document about the story, but for me, walking into a US brewery and actually going to their tap room and be able to have a tasting paddle, explore their beer range was so important. And, we're really proud of what we've achieved down here in Dramana. We're only open for 10 hours a week, so it's very limited. The rest of the week, it's full of beer and malt ready to brew beer. So, but to be able to do that, and it's actually one of the highest rated brewery tap rooms in the country, with over 1,000 Google reviews at 4.9 stars. So we get great feedback from customers who are delighted when they do get the opportunity to come down here. National partnership with Grilled was also a highlight, just to show that, again, large hospitality venues recognize the gluten-free consumer and recognize how important it was to have a beer for those people. And as part of that, Simon Crowe, who's the owner of Grilled, was very keen to invest in TWØBAYS and came on board as an investor, which is back now nearly 4 years ago. And that partnership's continued to grow. And then we also have national distribution with First Choice, which is now sort of all morphed into Liquorland. But that was for GFB around the country. So some of the best moments we've had, and we're looking for many more to come. Without doing, it was actually quite interesting in some of the comments, people not realizing that GFB was also one of our brands. And we certainly haven't done that on purpose, but we have tried very hard to make it a distinct brand and separate it from TWØBAYS. So TWØBAYS is 70% of our business. It's all about craft, choice, quality, premium, innovation, and try to make sure that you as consumers can get the same variety that every beer drinker can have in the barley beer world. And we've been, thrilled with what we've been able to do with that range and get the distribution that we have. We would love, obviously, more stockers to carry more variety. And that, again, is continuing the battle that we have out there every day from a sales perspective. Back in 21, we decided with, all the marketing we were doing to the gluten-free consumer, we recognized that gluten-free people really are traditional, same as normal people out there. And therefore, 85% of people don't really like a craft beer or would prefer an easy drinking beer. So we released the GFB draft. And then a couple of years later, we released the Aussie Ale as sort of the 2 beers that will probably limit to that range. But both of them easy drinking, low bitterness, just classic Aussie beers. And GFB, predominantly the draft now, is 30% of our business. So it's proven to be a very important beer. We call it often the Monday to Thursday beer, so that you have the beer during the week. And we recognize the price point allows that. And then on the weekend, hopefully you'll explore beer a little bit more adventurously with the TWØBAYS range. Without going into it, obviously our core range is there, but we've released over the years many limiteds, and we know that people eagerly await them. And I can tell you that on the 26th, I think it is, of October, something like that, Our next one is coming out, and we've got it in tank, and we were looking at it this morning, and we're pretty excited to be able to offer that to you, but there won't be any spoilers today. That's all part of the hype, but it's a new beer for us. And hopefully it's a new beer for many of you to try and see whether that's the style of beer that you like. Going to be perfect for summer. But we've done everything over the years, and we think some of the can work we've come up with from a design perspective has been great as well. So each one we eagerly await getting it out there and seeing the feedback that you give us as to whether you like that style of beer or not. From a beer awards perspective, clearly our World Beer Cup was 2 back-to-back highlights, but we've won numerous medals over the years. And we're really proud. We've won them every single year. We won them since the start. And really what we're looking for in our beer is consistency across the beers. We don't necessarily care about gold medals versus bronze versus silver. We want all our beers to be rated very highly and be considered to be of a very high standard from a quality perspective, so that we know that what we're offering you is, as consumers, is the best beer that we in the brew team can possibly make for you. But we also recognize that we're a business. From a day one, we have always set ourselves up with a board of directors. We always have board meetings every month. We have proper governance here, and we're very proud of the business awards we've won over the years, whether that's from back in 21, where we were in the AFR for the Fast 100 growers, to Xero Small Business of the Year award in 22, tourism awards, online retailers awards, or even just our TripAdvisor, which is just recognizing the tap room and the great feedback we get from there. They're all important to show that it's not just beer that makes a business. Beer is obviously incredibly important, but it's how we run the business in the background as well that is equally as important. So from a little bit more background on the revenue growth, we gave you the teaser at the start, but this is it over the years. So from FY20, which was really our first year, FY19 we started really at the halfway through the year. So FY20 was our first full year. We've had over $20 million in lifetime revenue, 357% growth over the last 5 years. And whilst we're not able to talk too much about forward-looking projections with equity crowd funds, we can say that for the first quarter this year, our sales momentum has continued, and we're up 20% over Q1 so far, which has been a really great start to the year. And we're just about to hit proper beer drinking weather. Although I think in New South Wales and Queensland, that's well and truly there already, and probably in WA. So it's been a great start to the year, and we're really excited to see how the next 9 months go as we finish the year out. As we said, we split the business into direct-to-consumer at 20% and our wholesale at 80%. And last year, direct-to-consumer grew 26%, largely driven by our online business. But our taproom business also managed to grow as well, which is in a tough market, a fair way out of town. We were really pleased with. And wholesale, which is our engine room, grew at nearly 17%. So again, we were really pleased that the bulk of the revenue is getting nice revenue growth. Might just have a glass of water. But now for the next stage, and I don't know, hopefully you've all seen the Shout That Doesn't Leave Anybody Out video with Aussie there, showing publicans and others that it's really important to offer a beer to consumers wherever and whenever we want one. A little bit about the gluten-free category, and I'm sure many on this call are active participants in this space, but there will obviously be others that are attracted by the investment opportunity with gluten-free and the role we play in that market. But the latest data is 27% of the population avoid or limit gluten, and that can be split sort of 10% between 10% that avoid it all the time and 17% that actually limit it. So coming in and out of the category. Grocery clearly understands the opportunity. When I got first diagnosed, and I've just had my 10th anniversary, there was no Arnott's, there was no Abbott's. I think cornflakes had just come out within the Kellogg's range, and San Remo was certainly there, but not with the range that they have. And Barilla was there within the pasta side of things. San Remo recently announced in CELAC Australia's magazine that 20% of their pasta sales now are gluten-free. And clearly, when we look at the range that all these grocery providers and food manufacturers are seeing from a category perspective, we see that as being really exciting for the role the gluten-free consumer is demanding within grocery, and we expect beer to be the next part of the puzzle. Hospitality venues clearly understand it. I mean, it's very hard now to find a venue that won't offer you a reasonably good gluten-free option, but yet surprisingly, we still get stunned by pubs where we are in their bottle shop and we might be selling extremely well in their bottle shop, but we still can't get into their bar. So again, just another part of the opportunity that we see in front of us. When we look at the potential gluten-free market, we see the market potentially at 5.7 million people, and that's over the age of 18. So it's a huge category that we're in there. We understand that not everybody in that category likes beer. We understand that beer is hard to get, but we really see that the growth in the category size is absolutely there. And from a contestability perspective, as a gluten-free consumer, you have TWØBAYS, O'Brien's, Hahn, and Wild as the predominant choices out in the market. So, there's not a lot of choice, and we certainly see our role in the industry is convincing the industry that the consumers are worth paying attention to, and that when you do pay attention to them as consumers, we are particularly loyal to venues that we know offer us a great experience. The gluten-free beer market then is a subset of the overall grocery category. Mortar Intelligence puts out some data, and there's obviously a range of growth data out there. We feel that the numbers behind this are pretty accurate from what we understand of the category, which is a couple of $100 million US at the moment globally, growing to about 400 million by 2030 US at a compound growth rate of 14.65%. We're currently tracking at 23.6%, so we're well above the growth of the overall category. When I first started looking at setting up TWØBAYS, and I often say this is all about me and me wanting to get a beer, and then I just am very happy to be able to share it with other people. These numbers were still reasonably good growth, but the size of the population was a lot smaller. They were talking, CSIRO back in 2016 was talking about 16% of the population avoiding gluten, and we're now up at 27%. And we think that means the potential gluten-free beer market is an additional 430 million litres. And it's a big number. And regardless of whether you believe that number or you believe $40 million litres, it's still a massive opportunity still ahead of us for the gluten-free consumers to be able to take their share of the overall market. And then the next thing really is to look at sort of what are we doing this raise for? We haven't taken this step lightly. We are a business that's been privately raised. We've raised $5.7 million of equity so far from existing sophisticated investors over the years. And we've had the same investors pretty much since day one, with a couple of new additions 3 or 4 years ago. And they've been incredibly supportive for us to grow to the stage we have. As part of this raise, I saw the opportunity and I campaigned long and hard to allow them, for them to allow me to offer shares in the company to the broader market. I really felt that our consumer base was loyal to the business and had asked us over many years about being investors in the business. And so we're excited to be able to take this out there now and see whether I'm right and whether there are many people out there that are keen to come on board as shareholders and can become what I hope will be strong brand advocates for us out in the marketplace. The major use of the funds, 80% of our business is B2B. We see that as a huge opportunity and where we need to really invest more heavily. So the focus is on putting additional sales effort, particularly into New South Wales and Queensland. New South Wales is 37% of the population. It's about 20% of our business so far. We see a huge opportunity for upside in New South Wales. We know from gluten-free expos and others that there are many, the same proportion of celiacs and gluten-free consumers in New South Wales as there are in Victoria. And Queensland is another one where we're probably about 10 or 12% of our sales when it's about 20% of the market. So huge opportunity there. In this industry, one thing I have learned over 7 years is you need arms and legs knocking on doors of bottle shops, venues, to talk to the owners and managers to convince them to put your product into their shelves. And that just requires distribution effort. We do use third-party distributors around the country, WA and Tassie and in Vic, and now in Queensland, we've just taken on a new one. And they can do that role for us incredibly well, with more arms and legs than we can afford to put on the ground ourselves. We're also looking to do a lot of work with retailers and venues around trade marketing. So this is about putting up signage and other things that allow the consumer, when you walk into a place, to know where the gluten-free beer is and not have to search around or not bother asking for it and just choosing the cider because it's easier to see. We also want to do a lot of work around brand awareness and marketing. We've been, hopefully you've seen some of our ads out there. We've obviously done the Shout That Doesn't Leave Anybody Out campaign, which we're doing through YouTube and other forms to really drive awareness more broadly and bring new people to the category. But we've also just recently done billboards in Melbourne and Sydney, and a guerrilla poster campaign is active now. In Sydney, we got the poster campaign, in Brisbane and Melbourne, we did billboards, and we'd like to continue to expand that. We think these are long-term investment decisions on the brand, but certainly if we look at the sales result that we're getting immediately, there's got to be some flow-on effect for those campaigns. We're going to continue our focus on keg sales. We know how important it is for consumers to be able to get a schooner of beer or a pint of beer with their friends. Last year, our keg business grew 36%. First quarter, we're up 70%. So we are working very hard to try and get those taps, which are highly contestable with both Lion and CUB, but also every other craft brewery wants to get that tap position. But it's a key focus for us. We know that when we do get on, we are pretty sticky, and that the publican will largely keep us on longer term. And so in every state, we're looking to create more and more opportunities for taps. People ask us a lot about it. I can tell you we try very, very hard to get it, but it is a tough market, and there's a lot of contracts between publicans and the big brewers to limit the availability of taps to smaller breweries like ourselves. We're also going to go international. So our first step, and I don't think anybody on the call will be from New Zealand, or maybe not, I'm not sure, is we are going to launch into New Zealand. We're in the process of just finalising our liquor licence. I'll be over there in a couple of weeks, organising a 3PL, and we're going to do it as a direct-to-consumer model first, which is what was successful for us in Australia. But then we want to, early in 2026, leverage that into wholesale distribution, and start to get our beers out into venues across New Zealand. It's an important market. We see it as the same size as Victoria. We know 1.6 million people travel between Australia and New Zealand every year. So there's a huge opportunity to get them to love our beer in Australia and then buy it again back in New Zealand, or vice versa. And so it's a huge opportunity. We have looked at other international markets, and we're in early stage discussions with Singapore, but wherever there's an expat community, we see there's a huge opportunity into Asia. People have asked us about the UK and the US, but to be honest, the UK rules are very different to ours, and therefore you can make gluten-free beer out of barley beers over there. And so it's not going to be a happy hunting ground for us. And the US has got 13 or 14 craft gluten-free breweries already. And beer doesn't travel very well. So our view is that within Asia and Australia, we've got so much opportunity already that we don't need to be chasing those faraway markets. The other part, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, was the launch in New Zealand, which we hope to do in either later this month or early next month, probably early next month. We're also about to, after the equity crowdfund, all our investors will actually become the first members of our loyalty program. And then for those people that didn't become investors, we will roll out our loyalty program to you probably, I'd say, early 2026, based on the time of year. But it's a great opportunity to reward loyalty to buying online through us. And we know from our sales that a lot of people are there buying either our bundles or taster cartons like the one in the picture, looking for a variety that is harder to get out in bottle shop land. We don't really sell a lot of pale ales and GFB drafts, for example, because they're much easier to find out there. But we do an awful lot of session ale, Pacific ale, stouts, Japanese rice lager, and bundles where people can get a bit of variety to consume. We're also looking at other social media avenues to create awareness. So TikTok is a classic case where we can now advertise alcohol on TikTok with age gating in there. And we see that as an opportunity for us to explore, to find new consumers for our brand. And we'll also be doing some work around website optimization, particularly in the world of AI, as people move towards AI and Google searching becomes less relevant, then your website needs to reflect that. So we're always looking to optimize that, and that will require investment as well. And then the other key thing we're looking to do is to open up a gluten-free venue closer to the Melbourne CBD. And the reasoning behind this is we understand that, you know, hospitality is particularly risky. Good venues are very, very good, and bad venues are not so good. So we're well of that, and we will make decisions very carefully from a management team perspective and also a board perspective. But it's an opportunity to balance our revenue stream and profit streams. Most craft breweries have very strong hospitality offerings. Ours is only 6% of our business, so it's a fairly small part of what we do. And we see an opportunity to get up there and give trial to consumers in an easier environment where you can go, you can try our beers, you don't have to come all the way down to Dramana. The volume of beer we will sell through that a well-supported city venue will be considerably more than we can sell down here. And doing wholesale volume is great, but it also allows consumers to try our product in a much easier way, and also for us to bring trade and others through and actually show them how we make the beer, the quality of the beer that they don't get to try. And, you know, we're just not able to get hospitality venues and the big retailers all the way down to Dramana to take them through the brewery very often. So we see an opportunity of being able to do that with this venue. We also see that it's something that can be replicated. I know not everybody's in Melbourne. Melbourne's where we are going to start. But if it does work and we can prove the model, then we will be looking to take the model probably in partnership with other hospitality operators into other states so that everybody can get the same experience as the Melbourne CBD will offer. And hopefully if you're traveling down to Melbourne and it's close enough in, you can drop in and come and try our beers, because again, coming all the way to Dramana is often difficult if you've got other things going on. So they're the three key planks of what we're doing with our funds. And we see, you know, our business, we keep it very simple, or as simple as we possibly can, around where we're keeping our focus. The investor rewards, obviously there are rewards for coming on board, and clearly the first one is you become a shareholder and owner in a brewery. And hopefully that will give you a lot of pride in our beers and pride to walk into venues and others and demand your right to a TWØBAYS beer. But we also understand that we'd like to reward those that come on board with loyalty status, which will give you discounts and other things. Birthday bonuses. We're doing a new can cooler especially for investors. It won't be a neoprene one. It's going to be one of the aluminium ones that are pretty good. We're pretty excited about showing that to you when it comes out. For investors above $750, you will get a t-shirt, and we will come out to you as part of the process and ask you for your sizing, so we make sure we organise the right size for you. These will all be ordered after we've closed the raise, though, so we know what we're ordering. There was ongoing discounts as you move up from pot to pint to jug, slab, and I can't see the other two. You know, there's an opportunity to take online discounts ongoing, and other things. We're also looking to give you a bonus from a points accumulation perspective under the loyalty program, where if you're a 750 plus investor, for example, you will get 1.5 points accumulating on your rewards program, and you will get that forever. And that's it from me. So cheers. Thank you for listening in. And I'll hand back to Mark, because I'm sure we've tried as much as possible to leave a lot of time for questions. So over to you, Mark. Hopefully we've got some questions already.
Yes, we do. We have 15 questions waiting, and I'll get to those just in a moment. But thank you for that presentation, Richard. I think that your passion and your commitment to your mission in your business really shines through in the way you speak about it and what you've achieved so far and what you plan to do in the future. So well done.
Thanks.
So with that, let's open up to some questions. As a buyer, so here's one from one of your customers. TWØBAYS has always been an expensive beer to buy. Where do you see the retail point going to make inroads to directly compete with other craft beers, or do you feel the price point already competes? This comes, I assume, through cost savings to do so. Do these exist with scale, or are you comfortable with being a more costly option, which gluten-free buyers may be happy to pay, but may not gain ground with the average drinker?
I think it's a good question. We obviously get asked a lot about price. I'll start with our malts are 7 times the price of barley. So from an ingredient input perspective, we obviously all use water, hops, cans, etc. But the malt itself is 7 times the price. So that's always going to be something that makes it impossible to compete with barley beers. And, you know, we know as consumers that when we look at other grocery items, and I always look at chocolate Tim Tams as a great example, just the price difference between the gluten-free ones and the normal ones. And that's partly because of scale. If you can imagine, a barley malt house does something like 1,500 tons at a time, whereas a gluten-free malt house does 3 tons at a time. So you just don't have that scale all the way through from having to pay farmers more to ensure that their farming practices, whether that's crops and segregation of crops to ensure that there's no spillage over fence when they're doing the seeding, through to cleaning headers and making sure that the malt or the grains that arrive in the malt house are gluten-free certified. So that's always going to be a challenge. And therefore, you know, we made a decision that you know, we were never going to get close to a barley beer price. We're not trying to. What we're trying to do is offer what we think is the best beer possible at the best price we can to ensure trial. We would love, you know, we know at our tap room, for example, that 80% of our consumers down here are not gluten-free. So we know there's a lot of trial of our product, but we don't expect them necessarily to be everyday drinkers of ours. There are some that, you know, we get a lot of people telling us that they prefer our beer. It doesn't make them feel as bloated. They like the lighter mouthfeel, whatever it might be. So we definitely see that. But, you know, we are asking people to pay a 25% price premium to a 4-pack of Bolter XPA, which is sort of where we look at it. And, you know, we struggle to see ways of getting that down. We will get, you know, as we get bigger, we are able to get economies of scale, which hopefully then means that we're able to, you know, manage our costs, input costs. You know, we have agreements with our malt supplier that if we increase volume, we get discounts, bigger discounts that flow through. We're starting to see that now as we've become bigger, more relevant with the can suppliers and the packaging suppliers, that there are opportunities to minimize that cost side of things. So I've been told to maybe stop screen sharing. So apologies for that. So yes, I think it's going to be very difficult. We're not trying to get down there. We're not trying to compete with a barley beer. We just don't see that as an opportunity that's there short term or long term.
As a consumer myself, I must say I understood the reasons for a premium price, but it's a premium I'm willing to pay for the way I feel when I drink it without having to sacrifice the varieties and the quality and the flavor that you produce. So
I should say, Mark, you used to own a barley brewery yourself, so therefore you know what.
yeah, that's true. Yes. And another one, this is something you and I were just talking about before, Richard, regional presence. How do you go about increasing your presence in regional pubs and liquor stores where the interest seems to be lower? I live regionally and have managed to get my IGA to stock your beers by asking, with no luck at the pub, but I know that their sales drop. They will simply stop stocking it.
I think we're talking to our PR guy this morning, and we hopefully get to go onto regional radio over the next week or so. Gluten-free people, our view is gluten-free people, they live in every city in the country. They're everywhere, and therefore It's important for us to try and get our products into those areas. They are harder to get to. So the avenue we're taking, to be honest, is to go through the head office side of things. So, for example, we are doing a pretty strong promotion with celebrations and Bottle-O at the moment, that we hope will encourage regional bottle shops to come on board and actually try putting our beer into their fridge and see how it goes. I had a fantastic trip to the Murray recently. I was able to go to the local IGA liquor, and they did have TWØBAYS in there in the middle of, I thought it was kind of relatively the middle of nowhere. So it was fantastic to be able to do that. And that's really our mission. I want to be able to do that. We are in Alice Springs now. We were in Kalgoorlie. We are in Broome. We know it's everywhere, and even the smaller towns. And we try and explain to the owners that, we're not going to be the biggest seller there. But they do have a consumer set that wants to be able to walk in and get a cold 6-pack on a Friday night to have with their friends at the barbecue. So, we'll keep trying. We'll keep looking to see if we can find distributors that work the regions that have arms and legs going up and down those highways that can knock on the doors for us. But it is a challenge.
One from a Tasmanian who enjoys your TWØBAYS beer at the Crescent Hotel, and it's on tap as part of their standard range. It's a joy to be able to have and drink on tap with my friends who are not celiac. Are there plans to try to integrate into more non-gluten-free tap rooms within and outside of Tasmania?
Yeah, as I talked about earlier, our keg business is up 70% this year. We had a fantastic case, and if you're in WA, please head to the Royal in Perth, where they took us on just recently, and it's selling its socks off, and we're struggling to keep up, which is, a venue, for example, just to give everyone a bit of relativity, would usually want one keg per week per tap, and we're doing 6 kegs a week at the Royal in Perth. It's fantastic. And so we know, there's no way knowing that's all being drunk by gluten-free people. So we think it's a great opportunity to try trial, and we see that as really important part of our strategy is to try to get more tap points. But as I said earlier, they're highly contested. CUB and Lion have the vast majority of them locked up, and the other 650 craft breweries are fighting pretty hard for the remaining ones. So we are growing. We are becoming more fortunate. In Tassie, we've got one in Hobart and one in Launceston. And, they've been incredibly loyal. We've been on there for many years, and we hope that will continue. And we'd like to find more, but, we do ask every day.
Here's one from somebody who doesn't think that Dan Murphy's does a good enough job with the range of your beers that they offer. Love your beer. Is it Dan Murphy's decision to only carry certain products? And if so, how do you plan to convince him to offer your full range, if that's your goal?
So be careful in case there are people from Dan's on the call. But to be in all honesty, to have national distribution with the big retailers is incredibly unusual. So we are extraordinarily thankful that they do put our pale ale in nationally, and that they do put our GFB draft in nearly everywhere apart from Queensland. And we try every year. That the way the cycle works with the big retailers is that there's really one chance a year to get range extension. And they balance a whole lot of considerations, one of which is sort of a declining beer category, and therefore they're taking more products off their shelves. They are adding more of their own products onto what is now less shelf space, so it becomes harder to get more. But we do know that when we do add a new product into Dan's, it doesn't take away from sales from our existing. We are seeing pale ale still growing at Dan's. We are seeing GFB draft growing quite significantly. And we're just starting to see, because we've just done a 12-month on the rice lager down in Victoria, to start to see the growth that's happening with that SKU as well. So we know they works. We know consumers want the variety. We just encourage everybody to walk into your Dan's, speak to the beer manager and ask him for a bit more variety. They can carry it. Some do carry our lager. Some carry our IPA. Some carry all of them, so it can be done. But we need the consumers asking as much as we keep going to the head office buyers.
Yeah, I have the same problem with Dan's, but I'm fortunate enough I live down the street from you, so I can pop in and come and get what I like. But then, of course, all your consumers have the opportunity to order it on your online store. as well and get the range that they like if they can't find it locally.
Absolutely, and we try and do things like bundles and other things to make it, allow you to get the variety of the SKUs that you can't get at your local bottle shop.
Here's a question about your growth from FY 24 to 25 compared to 23, 24. Your growth in the most recent financial year was higher than your growth in the year before that. What do you attribute the difference in growth rates to?
I think the cost of living, to be honest, we started, if I'm getting my financial years correct, FY 23, we started off with huge growth, and then the world suddenly cost of living came in a big way, and consumers really had to tighten their belts. And we saw everybody being nervous, whether that's hospitality venues were still struggling with staff, but also not willing to take on new products, to bottle shops sort of becoming very conscious around price and offering value and lower price point products. And so we saw that as a real battening down of the hatches all over the country. And we thought that would continue, to be honest, into FY25. So we were really excited when we started to see growth immediately in FY25. We grew 12% in the first quarter and last year, and we've grown 20% on top of that number again this year. But to see the growth again, it allowed us to think that even though with a price point and even though interest rates hadn't started to ease yet, we were still finding new consumers and people willing to invest their hard-earned money into a good premium product. Maybe they're not drinking as much, but they were making that decision. But that was the reason why FY23 was a pretty horrible year for many consumer goods. And so we were reasonably happy to get at least a little bit of growth, even though it was extremely modest.
Yeah, I think it demonstrates the continuing traction with your brand. Even in tougher economic times, more people are discovering your brand and going to it. Alcohol-free. Have you ever considered going into the alcohol-free beer market?
Well, we have, and we get asked regularly. Our challenge, so to make alcohol-free, you have to pasteurize your beer. Pasteurizers are both very expensive and take up a lot of footprint. And if you do look at the tour video, you will see that we don't have a lot of spare space here to do that. And therefore, the only choice for us is to actually then have to take the product, unpasteurize it, traffic it somewhere around Victoria, get somebody to pasteurize it for us, and then bring it back, which would make it very expensive. We have spoken to all the retailers, the major ones, and they've said no thanks. They won't put a gluten-free zero alc in their fridge, which would mean for us it's going to be an online-only option. Having said that, I kind of think, in my mind, if we can get our new hospitality venue up and running and actually have it get to the scale, then there is an opportunity for us to be able to offer it through there as well to get the sell-through. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense for us. We do 2,000 litres at a time. For us to be able to do cans, we really want to be doing 4,000 litres, which is something in the order of, I think it's about 1,000 odd cartons of beer. So we need to be able to convince that we can sell through that at a rate that's going to keep that beer pretty fresh. And at this stage, we've struggled. So we struggled on the technology side of things and the footprint. And we're trying to look at how can we get a market size that we think is going to make it worthwhile.
To hear the strategic decision-making process that you've implemented and the disciplines within your business.
We have to say it to a lot of people, a lot of the time, and we understand there's a real interest in it out there. But the retailers have been pretty burnt, to be perfectly honest. The zero alc beer market is much smaller than anybody ever thought it would be. It's still growing, but it's tiny. And so the retailers are really rationalizing their shelf space for zero alc barley beers. And they just don't have the appetite to be putting a gluten-free in there as well.
Some of your greater opportunity lies. Now you've touched on this one already, but I think that it's maybe worth having a look at again. Do you think you'll actually market directly to non-gluten-free beer drinkers? The question said, I always have some in my fridge, and most friends that come around and have no idea that they are drinking a gluten-free beer and are now actively purchasing it if and when they're looking for a pale ale or the like.
Yeah, we are trying. So our latest campaign, we call it Go With Your Gut, but it's a number of billboards, social media advertising, and now posters in Sydney, which are all talking about go on gut instinct. And the avenue we've taken with this to convince, because the way we see it is we've got to convince, if you're a barley beer, if you're a non-gluten-free person, you've got to have some benefit to pay 25% extra for our beer. And we think that benefit is going to resonate best if it's around, not that it's a healthier product, but if it makes you feel less bloated, it makes you feel, less full, then that's the avenue we're taking. We weren't allowed to say bloated. We have lots of consumers that tell us it makes them feel that way, but there's no legislated health benefit. So that's a claim we can't make. So we've sort of done it by Go With Your Gut, and that did get approved by the advertising standards. And we're seeing that as a huge opportunity to roll that out. We've had it not just from consumers telling us they've seen our billboards around Queensland and Melbourne and Sydney, but also hospitality, our venue partners, whether that's bottle shops or whatever, seeing us promote our brand in those markets. And that's really the approach we're taking, is to try and use that as the linchpin to convince non-gluten-free people to try our product and see if they feel that it's worth the 25% price premium.
Here's an interesting one that I haven't considered before. For pubs that do have TWØBAYS on tap, how do they manage the risk of using the same lines as non-gluten-free beers? How can pubs guarantee what's coming through the pipe is celiac friendly, even though what's in the keg is?
So it's a good one. It's one that we sort of have watched from day one. And the reality is that we encourage them and show them the beer line cleaning process, to take the taps off the wall, take the couplers, which are the things that attach to the kegs, put them through chemical cleaning, and chemical cleaning through the lines, which is pretty standard practice. But one of the reasons we actually don't make our keg beer available through our wholesalers for anybody just to walk in and order is that we want to have that talk with the publican first to ensure that they understand the cleaning process and they understand the risk that if they don't follow that process, that it may have to a consumer. Touch wood, we've been lucky, thankful, whatever, that we've never had an issue from anybody getting sick so far. We do also encourage the pubs to try and put our beer onto the cider tap, so that it's been running a gluten-free product through before, and then put the cider potentially onto another line, because it doesn't necessarily have to be considered to be 100% gluten-free, unless that cider company is making that claim.
Having run my own taps, my own business, if your taps aren't clean, if a pub's not operating with clean taps, it's problematic anyway, for more reasons than just gluten-free friendliness.
I should say also, and that's one of the benefits of, we do find then that we're more sticky at those pubs, because the owner is less inclined to put us on one week and then put on another barley beer and then go back and put us on the week after. So it does allow us to stay around on those taps, as long as we're selling at a right rate for longer.
Yeah. Curious about your plans outside the Australian and NZ markets. In Europe and the US, gluten-free beers can contain, and
I think I answered that.
Well, we've already answered that, really. Yeah, you're not going into those markets. Too big of an opportunity, too close to home.
Water is very, very expensive to ship, somebody told me once, and beer is 95% water. So
what percent of the company is currently funded by investors?
So we are 100% share equity so far. So $5.7 million has been invested by 11 investors since we started. The only debt we have is I think it's currently about $250,000, which is all lease debt associated with additional tanks that we brought on, or chillers that we replaced for environmental reasons, or cars for our sales team. So that's the only debt we have. In the financial statements that you'll see in the offer document, we had shareholder loans at the end of June 30. Those loans, the shareholders all agreed, instead of us having to repay those loans, that they would convert those loans to equity prior to us launching a crowd campaign, equity funding campaign. So all shareholder loans, which were about $500,000, have all been converted to equity, and that's reflected in the market, in the valuation that we've done of the business.
Yeah, I think that's significant too. So the majority of the debt that you did have on your balance sheet has not been repaid. The people have foregone repayment in favor of reinvesting into the business, and that is a strong show of strength and support.
Yeah, we think so. And there's been a lot of talk about ATO debt in our industry, and we don't have any outstandings with the ATO. We've been paying them all the way through, and so there's no legacy debt there apart from the existing leases, which have various maturity dates and interest rates.
Here's another customer again. Yeah, I knew you had a sticky customer base, but it's good to see them all asking questions and getting more involved. I know and love the products outside of being the only gluten-free operation. How do you plan to navigate the competitive landscape, specifically against the larger, more well-known breweries that are already expanding into gluten-free offerings, and how did you differentiate?
I think, obviously we're aware Lion with their Hahn gluten-free has been in the category. I think it was 2019 they launched. And I actually saw that as a huge positive. As a consumer, it meant that the big guys recognized, as a consumer and also a brewery owner, it meant that the big breweries were recognizing the gluten-free consumer as a market that deserved to have a beer product available to them. And we think in that space, there is opportunity for lower price point beers, which is the Hahn is obviously the market leader from a price point perspective. We launched our GFB, which is, somebody was telling me this morning, is 6% more expensive than Hahn. Maybe not when they go on promo, but something in that order. On a per liter basis, because obviously they do 330ml bottles and we do 375ml cans. And then we've got a premium price point, and we think in every alcohol industry and category there's good, better, best, and we think we've got the better and the best. The line will be with good. Definitely, there is always the risk that CUB or any other large brewery wants to move into the gluten-free space. We've seen certainly some craft breweries, promote their beers as gluten reduced or almost gluten-free, and my celiac friend can drink it. That may or may not be the case, but we often find that narrative just drops out of their discussion pretty quickly because of the risk profile that's going to it. We talk to the gluten-free consumer every day of the week. We are gluten-free. Well, I am certainly a gluten-free consumer. And so, whilst we recognize that others can come into the category, that will just make the category bigger. We said earlier that we think the category could be 400+ million liters, so we're sitting as an overall category, my guess is that somewhere around that 6 to 8 million liters is what it is now. So there's huge upside, whether more big guys come in or not. They're just going to bring more gluten-free consumers back to beer.
Yeah, they can make the category bigger for you, and you can still scoop all the awards for a premium product.
Yep, we'll just take a few people off each time.
What is the valuation on the shares issued?
So we're valuing the business at just under $16.1 million. That is 3.4 times FY25 revenue. In discussions with OnMarket and the team there, the average for crowdsourced funding valuations is 6.9 times revenue. We've always felt over the many years that those valuations really were hard to substantiate in an ongoing marketplace. We have looked at what we think the trade buyers are likely to pay if a CUB or a Good Drinks or anybody was to knock on our door, and use that as one of the criteria in our valuation. But at 3.4 times revenue, I'm not sure, Mark, if we're the lowest, but we're certainly one of the lowest. And we're doing that not because we don't value our business highly. We absolutely do. But what we do is we value you as investors even higher. And our shareholders are all sophisticated investors, and they didn't want to be in a position where we felt that we weren't allowing new investors to come on and have the same opportunity as us to make a return on that investment. There's absolutely no guarantee that there will be a return on that investment. So I'm making that very clear, but we want to give everybody the opportunity at a valuation that we think is reflective of a trade price, a trade buyer price. And hopefully we get the funds, we can continue to grow this business and make ourselves, a substantial player in the beer industry.
Yeah, and that to me, in my experience, that shows a lot of maturity in your strategic thinking on this, in growing the business for all shareholders and bringing people on at a rate that is commensurate with what your future strategy and plans may be. So I applaud you for that.
We want everyone to be, huge advocates, us, not just for our beer, but also for what we're doing from a business perspective. So, we're not going to be perfect, but we're going to try very hard.
Yes. Is there a succession plan?
I'm not that old yet, even though I might look it. But from a succession perspective, we absolutely see we've got a strong leadership team below. In Nathan as our marketing manager, we've just hired Ryan as our new head of sales. Christian is our head brewer / head of production. So I have no problems going on 2 or 3 weeks leave and leaving the business in these capable hands at any time. And we've been very fortunate that we've been able to do that for a number of years now. So we've got a great team beneath us. We've got good governance at the board perspective. Our existing 11 shareholders have long-standing industry experience, whether that's with Simon and Grilled or whether that's with Trevor O'Hoy as ex-CEO of Foster's or other people in the industry. So I think if something was to happen to me, we've got a great team below that can do that, and potentially some that can step up to do my role. They may not be quite as passionate as I am, because I'm pretty passionate about this business, but they're very good operators, and they've proven over. Most of our team now has been with us for 5+ years, which is almost unheard of in the craft beer industry in many ways. So, our sales team have been there since pre-COVID. We've been very fortunate, and I think that's part of the culture that we offer people to come on board as part of the team. But they also absolutely love the feedback they get from you as consumers that tell them how good a job they're doing and how good the beer is. So the brewers are super proud to be brewing the best beer that they can because they love reading the product reviews that you write for us on those beers. And the sales team love it when they hold an event and they get to talk to you face to face and understand, just how passionate you are about what we do for you as consumers.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, brewers are usually they don't like founders running them. They're pretty proud to do a good job themselves too, aren't they?
Yep.
Here's a procedural thing. What is the cutoff for sophisticated investors requiring a wholesale investor certificate? And is the timeline different for the higher amounts?
So no, sophisticated investors, which are people that invest over $10,000, do need to provide OnMarket with an accountant certificate. That period will stay open for as long as the offer is open, which at this stage will be the 30th of October is the closing date. However, if the offer gets to $2.5 million, and we've now had over 1,600 investors register their interest, so we've been blown away, and thank you all for that support. I think we've got a couple of hundred on the call out of those 1,600. That the offer then closes, and so we can't decide we want to do $3 million because there's lots of interest. At $2.5 million, the offer closes.
Yeah, and I will say at this point we've got a lot of questions yet to go through, so I'll be skipping through some of these. Some of these questions will be answered in the offer document itself. That offer document is available in a week from now when the offer opens. However, if you are a sophisticated investor and you meet the criteria to be able to invest more than $10,000, you have the opportunity to view that document now and make an investment before the public offer. So bear with me, everybody. I thank you for your questions, but to move through it, we'll keep with the ones that you won't have an answer in your hands in a week's time.
I think too, Mark, that we're happy to stay on the call probably for another half hour or so if people want to, or until we've covered most of the questions, because we think it's important that we try and give you as much information as possible. And I usually give long-winded answers, so apologies. I'll try and be short.
Yes. How do your volumes compare to O'Brien's and Hahn?
So we, through the crowdfunding side of things, I think we're about double the size of O'Brien's is what we can tell, give or take. From a Hahn perspective, we don't really have real data. We do have some information from one of the large retailers, and that would indicate that between Hahn and TWØBAYS, Hahn's 85% of the volume, and we are 15% of the volume. So they are, like everything in the beer world, the big brewers control, the vast majority. The difference between Great Northern and Stone & Wood, which was the largest craft brewery, is enormous. And it's no different in the gluten-free world. They can control so much distribution through retail. And we just see that as an opportunity. They can get national with BWS and Liquorland, for example, and we struggle in those two banners, and they are, significant players in the market. So we just see that as opportunity. But that's the sort of rough size.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one, because you do have a holding company. Are the crowdsourced investors holding shares in the TWØBAYS or shares in a separate shareholder vehicle?
No, sorry. So Next Wave is the entity that the shares will be issued in. That's the entity that all the existing shares are issued to. It owns 100% of TWØBAYS. We probably set it up that way because we saw an opportunity from day one that we would potentially add Next Wave owning shares in a hospitality venue that would be to the side of TWØBAYS. So that was the reasoning for setting up that structure. But at the moment, Next Wave only has one investment, and that is 100% of TWØBAYS. And so as shareholders, you all become shareholders in Next Wave Brewing Co.
Here's somebody who seems to have seen the documentation already. It mentions an exit plan for investment, including possibility of share buybacks. What are your exit plan options for investors?
I think I'm not sure we've got share buybacks in the offer document, but certainly, we see that there are potential trade sales to us. Obviously, as we talked about earlier, Lion has its own gluten-free product. CUB, Cooper's, Good Drinks, which is Gage Road in WA, Drinkworks, Casella are big brands. Forget the name of them now. The cordial business in WA that has South Australia, that has a large number of beer brands in their portfolio, or liquor brands. We see them as all potential acquirers of us at one point or the other. All will continue to grow and stay relevant and stay independent. But from an exit perspective, we're not looking to do share buybacks. People have asked about dividends as well, so I'll address that now, that we don't see any dividends being paid in the foreseeable future. Anything that we do make will be reinvested back into the business for growth. We think there's so much more opportunity and much more value for shareholders to continue to grow, to get to profitability, but also to continue to grow beyond profitability. But if there's no use for that profit and that cash, then we will return that to shareholders through whatever capital structure, whether that's dividends or share buybacks, that's decided by the board at the time.
Very good. Here's an interesting one. If you're investing via self-managed super fund, will the loyalty option be available to the investors who personally manage or own the fund?
The answer is we'll make it happen somehow. So we understand self-managed super funds and trusts and other things will be that people may want to buy, particularly above $10,000. We will work out a way, and I've already got the idea in my head now, to make sure that at least one person within that's not everybody in the super fund, but one person will be able to get the investor benefits.
style entities don't drink much beer, do they? So make it available to the people behind it. Profitability issues and so forth. The financial statements will be published with the offer document. So we won't answer those questions at this point in time. You'll be able to see that for yourself in a week's time. Are you looking for an IPO? And if so, when? You kind of talked about that just before, but IPO specifically?
I don't think IPO is going to be an option. We see a trade sale into, a larger brewer or alcohol industry. Clearly, I always say as a gluten-free consumer, I want my beer to be I want to be able to go anywhere in the country and be able to get a beer. And, with our existing team, we'll be able to get it to some point, and we'll see growth. But to really be able to get to 50,000 liquor licenses, somebody much bigger than us with a much bigger distribution and sales team will have to take it to that point. But an IPO, Good Drinks is just a classic case of a publicly listed brewery that decided to pull itself off the exchange because the market didn't understand it. So we see the opportunity more as a trade sale than a IPO.
And what about additional investments? Will there be additional opportunities to invest in TWØBAYS?
Maybe. I guess it's probably the easiest way to say it. There's nothing, we think that with this raise, of course, we haven't seen what size it is, but we're feeling fairly confident there's a lot of interest that will get us, if not past our maximum, certainly close to our maximum. And we certainly hope so. And that will see us through for some years with what we plan to spend. We're quite not frugal, but sensible about how we spend money. And if we can find a variable cost way of doing it rather than a fixed cost way of doing it, we will. And a classic case is in Queensland, where we were able to now partner with a different distribution company rather than hiring 2 or 3 salespeople of our own. Is a better way for us to be able to grow without taking on significant risks. So, but again, on the hospitality side, if we think the hospitality model works and we've proven it in and we want to expand that into other states, then there may well be a need for more capital to help do that without risking the remaining business. So that's probably where I see the most opportunity for requirement for new capital, but I don't see that in the short term.
Okay. Well, this is a timely question in relation to that answer then. Do you have indicative timelines for the opening of the CBD venue? And are there any scale limitations based on brewing capacity that might limit future growth?
So both very good questions. So the answer is no to the CBD venue. We are looking at venues as they become available and have done so for some months. None of them have really done what we want it to do. We think it's important to have a sized venue that we can have proper management in there. Because I'm no hospitality expert and I'm also very busy running a brewery. So we want to have something of scale. We want to make sure that the venue gives the gluten-free consumer the same experience as every other venue from an overall hospitality experience and welcoming, family friendly, those sort of things. So at this stage, we don't have one in mind. And the second part of the question, sorry, Mark, I rabbited on too much on the first part.
Capacity.
So from a brewing perspective, we hopefully you all saw our new tanks going in, which I think were last week. That's added another 20% capacity to the brewery. We think we probably got something like 40% headroom at full capacity if we brewed every single day of the year. The challenge, of course, is that you don't want to brew your beer too early, so the beer is nice and fresh for people to drink. But we do see in our forward forecast the need at some point to expand the capacity, which we think we've got a plan for how we could do that within Germana here, and get to bigger scale that will allow us then to get to really amplify our volumes if need be. And if we get to that point quicker, then we'll react quicker, and this money will allow us to have the flexibility to do that as well. particularly if we get to the upper level, we'll have funds to be able to, grow that scale within Dramana.
Very good. Just scrolling through here, bear with me.
Thank you for all your questions too, by the way. I think there's 49 still look like they're unanswered. So we're not going to get to all of them, I'm afraid, but hopefully a lot of them overlap each other.
Yeah, there are, and just to reiterate, those that are answered in the offer document, I won't deal with here, and those that look at forecasts and things like that, we're unable to deal with under the regulations for raising capital in this manner. We looked at other markets in celiac. A lot of people who have IBS activity avoid or limit gluten. Well, I think you've probably gone through that as well in terms of how you market to those people that enjoy and get benefits from what you brew.
I mean, I think it's important as you look for the next question, Mark, that, we know that with 10% of the population avoiding gluten all the time, celiacs are only 1-2% of that number at best. So there's still a lot of people with other conditions, whether they're medical or otherwise, that, they avoid gluten as a result. And so we see them absolutely as part of our core market that we target with all our marketing to make them sure and aware that there's a beer available for them if they choose.
Yes. Any chance of some more sour beers, please?
Whoever asked that question, you might be very happy soon.
Oh, you said there were going to be no spoilers. That's
I didn't say anything. I just said
okay.
I mean, one of the things is as you'll see in the pictures, we have to import our malt. In the video of the brewery, and in the video, our malts are looking pretty low at the moment. So we've got a 40-foot container on the way, but that means that we have to plan our beers out some months in advance, which gives us good discipline about what we're going to bring out. So we certainly know what beers we're going to be bringing out later this month and into also at the end of January. But we often have many people saying, can we bring back XYZ beer, or please keep this one in core range? And I'm sorry that we don't do that. It's not it's not out of spite, and I do love drinking most of those beers myself, but at the same time, there's so many different beer styles I want to try. So that's what our limited release program is all about. And for those that love our XPA, I'm also very sorry that we don't have that one anymore. We're very happy. The Pacific Ale, we think it's a slightly different style. It's slightly lower in ABV, which consumers are looking for. It's a cracking beer. It obviously won us the world's best gluten-free beer this year. We get great feedback from consumers on it. And whilst it is different to an XPA, hopefully you won't miss the XPA for too much longer and you get to try one of the other beers that you equally enjoy.
So I'm still scrolling through these a little bit, and hopefully those of you that have been kind enough to ask questions recognize that maybe your question's already been answered in terms of somebody else's questions. So I'm trying to consolidate a little bit so we can get through as many as we can. You mentioned that you might look to partner for venues in other states in the future. What are the barriers for establishing a GF venue in existing areas with clusters of breweries, e.g. Inner West NSW?
Very good area. We don't see ourselves as, well, we see ourselves a little bit competing with other hospitality venues on a, share. We'd like people to come to our venue that don't have to be gluten-free, but we also see it as a destination. We absolutely see New South Wales as an area where we'd love to both expand our wholesale side of our business, but also that hospitality side, and give people the ability to go somewhere that provides 100% gluten-free and a great choice of beers, and is just as good for non-gluten-free people to come and visit and have an experience as it is for gluten-free people. So it's definitely there. And I think in New South Wales, there's some very good sort of mid-size hospitality groups that maybe at some point in the future we can partner with, and that would be a state where we see the partnership model working from our perspective pretty well. But we've obviously want to prove that what our formula is down here works, and that can be replicated by a third party up there. Same for inner West Queensland, Brisbane as well.
It's an interesting one. What do you see as your biggest barrier, and how do you intend in overcoming it?
I think availability is there. So what we find, in all honesty, is that a lot of the pub managers move on from venue to venue. So you may convince them at one venue and then they move on or out of the industry, and you're starting again with the next person that has to be convinced that they have gluten-free consumers walking in. So there is, that's a huge challenge from that perspective. There's a lot of, in the demographics of gluten-free, my demographic is around 15% of the population avoiding gluten. When you talk about Gen Z and millennials, it's nearer to 40%. So a lot of the venues are still owned, managed, and controlled by people of my demographic that don't maybe understand how prevalent gluten-free is either amongst their friendship group or others. And so convincing them is often a bit of a challenge. But, we do see us winning that battle daily, and that the Royal in Perth was a classic example where the actual owner of those venues is gluten intolerant, didn't realize, never heard of our beer, even though we think everybody knows our beer. But, the beauty is I love it when I hear that there's so many more people that have never heard of us, that it gives us an opportunity to get into those places. So it's about awareness of the gluten-free consumer. It's about awareness of us as a supplier into that space. And they're the ones that, require investment, both in marketing to create awareness of the brand, but also for consumers to walk in. And, I'm probably, like many people on the call, sick and tired of walking to places saying, have you got a gluten-free beer, and being told not. So often I don't bother asking. Or I go to the TWØBAYS Stockist page and just go to those venues that I know do. And that's a bit of, on us too. And then we'll go in there and the pub will say, well, nobody asks for a gluten-free beer. Or they put it in the fridge and then they don't put it on the drinks menu, so you don't actually know there's one there and you can't see it behind the counter. So those sort of things are all the challenges that we work through on a daily basis, and we're trying to increase that through our trade marketing, as I talked about earlier, point of sale within venues to allow consumers to know that there is a gluten-free beer somewhere in the fridge. And those sort of things is where we see the opportunity. And I think the reality is that we're seeing it now is that, as people become more and more aware, our brand becomes better known, then we get the growth on the back of that, which is why we're seeing nearly 20% growth last year and 20% growth again so far this year. It's not because we put more salespeople on the ground or we're spending any more on marketing yet. It's just awareness of the brand and the consumer.
Yeah. And we've got two questions, a similar topic. So you've been successful at the MCG. Are you looking at other stadiums within Australia? And also, what about the airline industry for their lounges and their in-flight service?
Both absolutely high on our list. We have been successful with the MCG and with Amy Park down here in Melbourne. We've had a little bit of traction with the Melbourne Tennis Centre, not for the Australian Open, but for outside of that. We are talking to a couple of other stadiums down here. And we have had early stage dialogue in New South Wales. And if our customer from Perth, who's been asking me to get us into Optus Oval, is on the call, we are trying very hard to do that as well. We absolutely see it. And some of it is contractual. If they're a Hahn or a Lion contracted venue, like some of the ones in Queensland, then getting us in there is going to be near on impossible. And to be honest, Hahn doesn't really promote it's gluten-free. It's in a bottle, so they don't want to put it in the non-members areas. So those venues are a challenge, and we're really hamstrung there. But for those venues that are CUB contracted, we see them as absolute opportunities to get in there and keep pushing. So we're trying very hard. On the airline side of things, we have nothing higher on our list than being able to go to get on an airline and get our beer in air, but that might be a little bit pie in the sky. But we have had some conversations with Virgin about their lounges over the years. We struggled to get that deal done. So if you are a Virgin frequent flyer, please drop into the lounge if you are a lounge member and demand a gluten-free beer from TWØBAYS, and that will help us with our argument. We think it's a huge opportunity, and you walk into those lounges and there's plenty of fridge space to put a couple of rows of gluten-free beer in there and make that consumer very loyal to your airline. So we're trying. Anywhere that we go is where we want to get a beer, whether that's at sporting stadiums, whether that's at music concerts, whether that's on airlines, cruises, or your local footy club, or golf course. So we're trying all of them. And the beauty with us is we don't see anywhere as off limits for us to knock on the door and ask. So that's the reason why we want more salespeople, is to be able to knock on more doors more regularly to get us there.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's a big market. It takes commitment and investment to tap it. Now, this is one that is answered in the offer document, but I think it's an important topic, so I'll bring it up for you, Richard. How will you keep us informed as shareholders?
So your shares will be registered with a place called Sharesies, which is a share registry, and through that there is an avenue for communication. So what we are planning is there will be an annual report, which we do already for our existing shareholders, and that will be probably beefed up a bit in response to sort of giving shareholders an update on progress. We also see opportunities where we've had a key success where we want to let you know that, so that you can either frequent that venue, go to that stadium, whatever it might be. But that communication we see is going largely through the share platform registry, because that will get straight into your inboxes once you sign up to there. But we'll continue to do that through other key wins we'll do through our normal communication channels and EDMs. But Sharesy will be there, but there'll definitely be at least an annual report, and there will be an AGM available to all shareholders to attend. It'll be a webinar type similar to this.
Very good. And as I said, that is amplified upon in the offer document, because there are regulations requiring around the protocols that are taken to communicate with investors. So you are protected in a regulatory manner as well. Here's a thoughtful question, Richard. Hospitality. It's a difficult business, particularly in inner city areas, and there have been numerous high-profile closures or entries into administration for other business operating in markets that are less niche than gluten-free beer. How much is a city location considered crucial to business's future versus an aspiration if the right site comes along?
I think we're not betting the business on anything. So, we are well aware that hospitality is a tough industry. I think it is always a tough industry, to be perfectly honest, but it is certainly at the moment. There are some very good success stories, and within our shareholder group and board, we have people that are significant investors in large hospitality areas. So we get to see firsthand what works well, what doesn't work well. So we're well aware of the risks, and we're well aware that good could turn bad pretty quick. Therefore we won't be we won't be saying we must do this at all costs. If we don't feel that we've got the right venue, that we can make sure that on a better than average chance of being successful, that we have a pretty good go at it, then we won't do it. So it's a key part of what we want to do. We see our wholesale business as the growth engine. It's the biggest part of our business. We would love to balance our revenue streams. We would love to balance our consumer experience by having that hospitality venue. But if we can't find the right place, or we think it's too risky, we won't rush into anything.
That's a good plan. Oddly, in the barley based brewing industry, having your own venue is pretty much a common denominator for those that are successful in that arena as well. So hospitality is hospitality versus hospitality attached to a brewery. There's a bit of a difference there too, in my eyes anyway. But
and ours won't be necessarily marketed. We want ours to be a broader hospitality venue than just a tap room. So it will have our beers, obviously, for people to try and drink, and it will be gluten-free. Outside of that, it will be a broader thing than just a brewery tap room.
With the difficulty in getting space on taps, what is the realistic TAM for TWØBAYS to be chasing in terms of tap space? And you mentioned you are sticky. Can you clarify what the churn rate is once you do get tap space? Nothing better than walking into a location and seeing 2 beers on tap.
I think so. I don't know the churn rates, to be honest, but we tend to find an example is Young and Jackson's, where we've been on tap now for 4 years with them, and they are one of the largest pubs down in Melbourne. In Sydney, the Everleigh, I think, went through a refurb, and then we came straight back on tap at the Everleigh. In Adelaide, we've got the Duke and the Port that have had us on tap now for 5 or 6 years, and down in Hobart, we've obviously got the Crescent down in Hobart, as the person said earlier, but also St. John's up in Launceston, and have had for many years with there. There are some smaller ones, but most of them we tend to find we stay on. But there will be probably some where, you know, the rate of sale maybe hasn't hit their target, or they haven't promoted it, or we haven't helped support it as much. But it is a challenge, you know, but what we're seeing is huge growth in that. You know, it's now probably somewhere between 12 and 15% of our volume. So it's growing. In a traditional craft brewery, tap beer is probably 50% of their volume. Some of that comes through their own venues, and some of it is easier to find destinations out there. So we still see a huge upside in our mix of wholesale business between pack and draft. And we keep chasing that business. We know our revenue from a venue is probably 10 times what it would be if we go from cans in the fridge to a tap.
And here's a procedural.
I don't know, Mark, if we want to call this at 2 and
yeah, let's do. I'm
just
down
so everybody's
to the last,
got time commitments. So
it's down to the last question, and it's a procedural question, so I just might deal with it myself. What if the minimum raise isn't met? In that case, the offer closes, and anybody who's invested gets their money returned. So the minimum must be met for the offer to proceed. And the minimum price is set at a rate to make sure that we can get success, and that there's enough money to make a positive difference to the business. And of course, it's quite a low between their aspirational amount that would allow pursuing the strategy as been outlined here today. For that, I want to thank you all again for your attendance and for your questions. And for those of you that are available to or are qualified to be able to look at the offer document now, please do look at that. The rest of you, you can see that in a week, and we look forward to you looking at that and engaging with us further. Richard, thank you for your time and your passion. It's just so exciting to hear you talk about your business and where you want to take it.
No, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Mark. And thanks, everybody, for coming. I know a lot of people have dropped off the call, but we still got nearly 100 odd on. So thank you for taking the time. I'm sorry we dragged over. We were happy to try and answer as many questions as possible. We'd love all of you to come on board as shareholders, obviously, but understand that may not suit your investment profile. But please, if not, keep drinking our beer, and happy to answer any questions. My email is generally on many of the communications, so feel free to call me or email me if need be.
Very good.
Otherwise, thank you. Tuesday, the offer document goes live on the 14th. Looking forward to
That's
day.
correct. Yeah, 1 week from now. And for those of you that may have missed some of the questions or anything, this Q&A will be available for you to download and look at your leisure, both on our platform and will be coming around in emails as well. So thanks again.
Thank you.